When we are children, time seems to flow differently. Every day, the universe expands before our eyes, full of possibilities and promises of adventures. Summer vacations seem eternal, and every second is a small eternity filled with discoveries. Afternoons are not just about the clock. They are made of imagination, laughter, and moments that, for the youthful heart, never run out. The feeling that time is at our disposal, like a vast ocean ready to be explored, is almost palpable. And somehow, it feels like time never passes. Quickly enough, however, as we grow older, something changes. Time, which once seemed to stretch endlessly, now slips through our fingers. Weeks turn into months, months into years, and before we know it, decades have passed. What was once a calm, serene river transforms into a relentless current. We feel, with a quiet intensity, that time speeds up as we age. But why does this happen? Why does it seem that, as we grow older, the days fly by, while in childhood they drag on slowly? The first explanation we can consider is the subjective perception of time. When we are young, each new experience is unique. Everything is novel, and the brain records every detail with full attention, as if each moment were a discovery. The still developing child's brain captures and processes information densely, creating vivid, detailed memories. As a result, the sheer amount of new experiences we have in childhood creates the feeling that time is longer. Each new lesson, each newly formed friendship, each invented game, all become layers of memory that, together, make us feel that period of our lives lasted much longer than it actually did. As we grow, however, new experiences decrease. Routine settles in, and days become more predictable. The brain begins to prioritize efficiency, simplifying daily tasks and processing fewer new pieces of information. Time then begins to be marked by repetitive cycles, like the hands of a clock, spinning endlessly. No matter how much we try to savor each moment, the feeling of speed increases. This happens because, as we age, repeated experiences have less capacity to create the same sense of novelty. Memory, which once stored a million unique moments, begins to feel more fluid, less dense. This phenomenon can be compared to the feeling of a snowball effect. When we were children, each new experience accumulated intensely, making time seem more spacious. In adulthood, however, the opposite seems to happen. As the years add up, the experiences we've already lived accumulate, creating the impression that time distorts, compresses, and accelerates. Each passing year becomes a smaller fraction of our total life, intensifying the sensation of time passing. But there's something else that helps us understand this feeling of time speeding up. As we age, the very nature of human experience. When we are young, we are still searching for our place in the world, for a purpose. Each day seems to contain infinite possibilities, like a blank sheet, ready to be filled with all sorts of adventures. But when we grow older, we are more focused on consolidating a life, fulfilling responsibilities, and achieving goals. Time becomes a precious commodity, spent on commitments, work, and routine. The feeling that time is fleeting reflects the perception that, in some way, we are losing the ability to live each moment with the intensity we had in childhood. What many don't realize is that this perception of time is not just a matter of sensation or psychology. It's about how time is experienced at different stages of life. And it is at this point that the ideas of Henry Bergson, one of the most fascinating philosophers on the concept of time, come into play. For him, time is not a simple linear measure, like a clock that moves forward without stopping. Time for Bergson is experienced qualitatively, and its experience varies according to our consciousness. Time is not just what passes. It is, in fact, the way we experience that passage. Throughout life, our relationship with time changes profoundly, and Bergson invites us to reflect on this. The child, with their sense of discovery and total immersion in the present, lives a dense time, a time full of meaning and experiences. The adult, immersed in daily tasks, experiences a time that is more extensive, but at the same time, emptier of intensity, more focused on repetition than on novelty. For Bergson, time is a lived experience, not just a count, and it is this experience that changes as we age. As our perception of time transforms, we begin to realize that what truly slips away is not time itself, but the way we relate to it. How can we understand this? What does it really mean to live time? The answer to these questions lies in Bergson's philosophy, where we can find a new understanding of time, beyond the simple clock that ticks away the seconds. In this moment of deep reflection on the nature of time, an opportunity arises for a new way of seeing life. Not as a race against the clock, but as an invitation to revisit the way we experience each moment, Henry Bergson's theory, measured time. And Durashan Henry Bergson's theory of the nature of time invites us to a deep reflection on how we perceive and live time, challenging the traditional view imposed by modern society. Bergson distinguishes between two types of time, measured time and duration, and his philosophy leads us to realize that the experience of time cannot be reduced to numbers and units, like the hands of a clock that insist on marking seconds and minutes. Measured time is the time we can quantify, the objective, linear, and measurable time. It is the time of calendars, hours, and minutes, the one we all use to organize our daily lives. It is universal, impersonal, and serves to mark the sequence of events precisely. This type of time is a social convention, allowing us to synchronize our actions and coordinate our commitments. Measured time is, therefore, the time that is at the mercy of machines, a time that can be divided, counted, and compared. On the other hand, Bergson presents the idea of duration, which is lived time, subjective time, immeasurable, and fluid. Duration is how each individual experiences time in its entirety, through their own feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. Unlike measured time, which is static and mathematical, duration is dynamic, as it is closely tied to our consciousness and emotional experience. For Bergson, time is not just a sequence of events. It is the totality of the sensations and experiences we live. It stretches and contracts depending on a person's mental and emotional state. For example, when we are engaged in an enjoyable activity, time seems to pass quickly, but when we are anxious or bored, it seems to drag on. This flow of time, which adapts to our perception and feeling, is the true duration. Bergson's criticism of the mechanical time of modern society focuses on the fact that by exclusively adopting measured time as the only way to understand the passage of time, we end up alienating ourselves from our true experience of the present. The linear and rigid view of time, dominated by the constant pursuit of efficiency and productivity, creates a sense of distance from our own lived experience. Time is seen as an external, impersonal, and calculable force, forcing us to live according to its dictates. This way of seeing time, marked by division and quantification, is what Bergson calls mechanical time. By submitting ourselves to the tyranny of mechanical time, we risk becoming mere instruments of a larger machine, living automatically and disconnected from the nuances of our personal experiences. Time becomes something impersonal and exact, and we, as individuals, begin to lose the ability to connect with time in a more organic and intuitive way. This distancing from duration creates a sense of depersonalization, as we become captives of a time that is not our own. It tells us what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, without considering the rhythms and needs of our inner being. Bergson believes that this view of time, dominated by the logic of measurement, significantly contributes to the anxiety that characterizes modern society. We live constantly pressured by the clock, anxious to meet deadlines, achieve goals, and speed up our lives to fit into a pre-established mold. This acceleration of time, imposed by the need for measurement, can create a state of constant tension where we forget to live in the present moment. To experience life in its entirety. In his Critique of Mechanical Time, Bergson proposes that reclaiming duration does not mean completely rejecting measured time, but rather finding a balance between the two. He suggests that, to reconnect with our true experience of time, we must cultivate mindfulness of the present, a sensitive listening to the flow of our perceptions and emotions. Time should not only be counted, it must be lived. By adopting a more personal and subjective perspective of time, we can reclaim the richness of everyday experiences and rediscover the pleasure of living in the now. Bergson's Critique of Mechanical Time also prompts us to reflect on how modern society, by valuing efficiency and productivity over subjective experience, contributes to a world that is increasingly impersonal and alienating. The mechanization of time has a profound impact on our emotional and psychological health, making us less present and more distant from ourselves. When time becomes a commodity to be consumed, rather than an experience to be lived, we lose the ability to savor the moments of our lives. A key is in this reflection on time that Bergson challenges us to reconsider the way we see the passage of time. How can we reconnect with duration, with lived time, in a world that insists on quantifying and dividing every moment? How can we find a balance between measured time and duration to live more fully and authentically? These questions lead us naturally to the final part of our philosophical journey: how this theory of time impacts our daily lives, our relationships, and even the forms of art that so profoundly influence our experience of existence. Now that we understand the differences between measured time and duration, it is time to explore how this philosophy can change the way we relate to time in our daily lives, in the relationships we cultivate, and in the art we create. How can we live more consciously with time, without being dominated by it? Art as a reconnection with lived time. Henri Bergson's ideas on the nature of time, with his distinction between measured time and duration, have deeply influenced the way we perceive and represent time, especially in the arts and literature. For Bergson, the experience of time cannot be reduced to calculations and measurements. It is an emotional, subjective, and profound phenomenon, an experience that transcends the mere counting of minutes and seconds. It was this understanding of time that inspired writers and artists to explore the fluidity of time in innovative ways, seeking to reclaim the subjective and emotional experience of lived time, something that the clock and science cannot fully capture. Great literary figures, such as Marcel Proust and James Joyce, delved into this idea of fluid and subjective temporality in their works, creating narratives that allow the reader to experience time in a more sensitive and profound way. In Search of Lost Time, Proust offers a philosophical reflection on memory and lived time, where moments from the past are not simply remembered, but relived through a deep emotional dive. The famous Madeleine episode, where a simple act of eating a pastry evokes childhood memories, exemplifies how time can be captured in its purest essence, not as a straight line, but as a constant flow of overlapping and intertwined memories. For Proust, lost time is not truly lost. It is preserved in emotional memory and experience, beyond the reach of the clock's measurements. In turn, James Joyce, in Ulysses, explores time in an even more radical way, challenging the traditional linearity of narrative. Temporal fluidity is felt not only in the memories and thoughts of his characters, but also in the very rhythm of the work, which oscillates continuously between the present and the past, without one unit of time dominating the others. Joyce, like Proust, moves away from the mechanical time imposed by society to enter into lived time, the time of experience, perceptions, and consciousness, the flow of thoughts and the instant associations that arise throughout the day of. Leopold Bloom are examples of how literature can transport us to an experience of time that is not linear or rigid, but dynamic and full of possibilities. These authors, influenced by Bergson's ideas, show us that art can be a powerful way to reconnect human beings with lived time. Through literature and the arts in general, we can escape the clutches of mechanical time, which alienates us and separates us from the deep emotional experience of the present. Art allows us to transcend the superficiality of seconds and minutes, guiding us into a space where time is felt more intensely and authentically. By exploring the flow of consciousness, memories, and emotions, art proposes a way to relive time, not as a sequence of events, but as a rich tapestry of moments and feelings. Bergson's proposal for us to reconnect with the present, to live time fully and consciously, goes beyond philosophy. It offers an answer to the acceleration of time in modern life, where the rhythm of routine, the demands of productivity, and the constant pressure of the clock pull us away from the true experience of now. In a world where mechanical time dominates, Bergson's proposal is an invitation to slow down, to perceive time not as a resource to be managed, but as something to be lived each moment. He challenges us to absorb the essence of the present, to live the experience of time in its entirety, to feel the flow of our own emotions and perceptions without rushing, without the need to measure and categorize every second. For many, Bergson's call might seem utopian, especially when time feels increasingly scarce and life more accelerated. But it is precisely in this frantic pace that the reflection on time becomes more urgent. We live in an age of excess stimuli, where we are constantly bombarded with information, commitments, and expectations, and time seems to slip away quickly. The feeling that time passes quickly is a daily reality, but it can also paradoxically be an opportunity for us to return to what is essential. By reclaiming the perception of lived time, we can find more meaning and serenity in the small things, in the pauses, the simple gestures, the full presence in what we do. This reconnection with lived time does not require us to reject measured time or time dedicated to productivity, but rather to learn how to integrate these two dimensions in a more balanced way. We can seek a life rhythm that allows us not only to fulfill obligations, but also to live the moment with intensity, without being enslaved by the clock. Bergson's proposal is, thus, a form of resistance to the existential emptiness that often arises when life is lived solely under the dominion of mechanical time. In the end, we are invited to reflect on our own relationship with time. Are we living life fully, absorbing its essence, and connecting with the present, or are we simply ticking off a pre-established agenda, racing against time? Bergson's proposal is an invitation to reflect, an invitation to feel time in a deeper, richer, and truer way. After all, as he himself stated, true duration is the one that is felt, not the one that is counted, and perhaps it is precisely in this space of subjective experience, which art and philosophical reflection offer us, that we can find a more genuine way to live time more consciously and fully. When we question our relationship with time and strive to live it with greater presence, we may discover that time is not something that passes without meaning, but something that belongs to us, shaped by our experiences, emotions, and consciousness. Ultimately, perhaps the greatest challenge of our time is precisely this: learning to live time, not as something that slips away, but as something we can experience in its entirety.